folks, Tim Freitas here with the Garden of English, and we're going to do something a little bit new today because we're going to start doing a segment of AP Lit videos too. We're going to try to do some quick videos about how to break down the prompt, how to write thesis statements, how to write body paragraphs, and how to write conclusions. And although typically I'm pretty long-winded, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to keep these under 10 minutes so that we can get in and get out. So without further ado, let's get right on the road with this. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to just show you how to break down the prompt when you see it in a nice quick way that will help you as you learn to, as you write your paper. Because if you break down the prompt the right way, it's going to make reading, no matter what the reading selection is, much, much easier. Everything that I say and do is actually summarized in these points here, so that's just something that you might want to be aware of. If you forget anything, you can actually just read the file that I will actually put below the video. But without further ado, I'm going to use my favorite question 2 passage for these videos that I make, and that's going to be the cherry bomb passage, and that came from 2010, and it was the Form B question. So without further ado, let's read the prompt. Let's learn how to break it down. We'll make one final comment about complexity, and then we will move on with our day. So the prompt reads as follows. It says, the following passage is taken from the story Cherry Bomb by Maxine Clare. Read the passage carefully, then write an essay in which you analyze how Clare uses literary techniques to characterize the adult narrator's memories. So you're going to notice that I've got this little organizer down here, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at how to use this organizer, once again, to help us answer the prompt. The first step of what we want to do when we get a question 2 prompt is to identify what we call the tag. And tag just stands for title, author, and genre. So all you would have to do is fill in the title, which is Cherry Bomb. You want to keep it in quotes, though, because it indicates that it's a short story. If it's an excerpt from a novel or a longer work, this will either be italicized or underlined, and that's what you'd want to put in there. Our author is indeed Maxine Clare, so we're going to put Maxine Clare right here, and then our genre would indeed be short story, and we know that once again because of the quotation marks that are there. And so we would just fill that in, and I'll show you what that looks like by scrolling down, because I do have an answer sheet at the end of this document as well. Okay, and it looks like this. It just says Cherry Bomb, Maxine Clare, and short story. The next thing that we'd like to do is we'd like to get some exposition from the prompt so that we know we have some background information to use as we are about to interpret the reading. We haven't gotten to the reading yet, but oftentimes prompts do give us some information that can be helpful to get us primed for what we're reading so that we can know. And the important information that we're going to see in this prompt, right, is going to be taken from what we're commanded to do. And the exposition is we have an adult narrator who's remembering her 5th grade summer world. So what I would type in here is I would say there's an adult narrator, and I would say that she's remembering her 5th grade summer world. And sure enough, once again, if I scroll down to the answers, that's exactly what we're going to have listed right out there. An adult is remembering a childhood, and the memories are from a 5th grade summer. Now, the reason why this is nice is because stereotypically, most of the time when people look back on their elementary school years or in the years right before they started becoming a young adult, they were still comforting memories. And because of that, I can start thinking about, okay, what is most likely the projection going to be when I read the story? So this helps us anticipate what we're going to be reading, and that allows us to actually interpret it better when we go to approach the reading because we've never read it before. The next thing that we would do after we've found our tagline and our exposition is we're going to underline and we're going to find out what we're commanded to do. And the way that we do that is we look for the word analyze that shows up in every prompt, and we then take the word analyze and we go to the end of that sentence. So we'll notice that in this prompt, it starts with analyze and it finishes with world. And so because of that, the command, I wouldn't write the whole thing out. Who has time for that, right? But I can just do analyze to world here, type that in, and that reminds us what we have to do. Now, the reason why it's important to find this command is because you are told to analyze, not describe, not list, not summarize. And if you know how to analyze, you can actually write your body paragraphs really well, because analysis has 3 parts. You identify, you break down, and you explain. And if you actually do that in your body paragraphs, those 3 movements in that order, you will provide analysis. In your topic sentence, you'll identify what the author is doing and why. You'll then break down where it's seen in the text, and then you'll explain how that text shows the why from your topic sentence. So that's why we want to focus on this word analyze. The other reason why we want to focus on the word analyze is it's going to help us create a what question that will get us to read accurately. And so what happens here is I'm going to go to this word analyze, and then I'm going to find the infinitive, that's to and then a verb, and I'm going to say, what can't I know after that infinitive? And we'll note here that the infinitive is this word to characterize. Okay, or should I say is this phrase to characterize. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, what can't I know after the word characterize? And I know that the narrator is talking about a 5th grade world. I know our narrator is a female. I know our narrator is an adult. But do I know in what way she has characterized her memories yet? And I do not. So I'm going to create this question. What is the narrator's characterization of her 5th grade memories? And if I can answer that question when I am done with reading, then I am going to be able to write this paper no problem. Now, one last thing I want to just cover though is creating this question is done before we read. So now we know, oh, there should be an apostrophe there. So now we know, okay, what we're reading for. And if we can get to the end and we can answer that even on the most basic level, we can write a decent paper that can score most likely a 4 out of 6 points on the new rubric. However, because we're doing AP Lit, we want to think about this idea of complexity. I know the word complexity does not show up in this particular prompt, but it does show up in many. And we always want to look for complexity in AP Lit. So I just want to talk about complexity super quick, and then we'll move on to looking at how we do this in our next video. But complexity works in 3 ways. Complexity, you can have complexity in layers, okay? So when complexity is done in layers, that means that a character might have similar character qualities, but there are multiple of them, but they're connotatively the same, right? So I might have a character who's kind, industrious, and jovial, and all of those are positive in nature, and the character doesn't necessarily change. It's a very positive character, but there are layers to that character. So although the character might be considered static because it's unchanging, it doesn't mean that it's not a complex character because there are layers to that person. Settings can be this way too. I might have an ominous and foreboding setting that could also have something violent going on, and because of that, it becomes a little bit oppressive. That can happen. I think of the scenes in Macbeth with the witches, where that's typically how the setting works. All of those words are negative and fearful. However, right, being ominous and being violent are not always the same thing. Being oppressive and foreboding are not always the same thing, but they certainly fit in the same vein. So they're complex and they're layers. Okay. The next way you identify elements of complexity would be when things are contradictory in nature. Okay, so we might have a character who seems innocent but is extremely maniacal, and because of that, we see that contradiction of character, and we want to try to explore that, right? We could also do this with elements of setting as well. We might see a setting that is almost entirely comforting, but there's something that kind of just isn't right. The best example I could think of for that is the short story Most Dangerous Game in General Zoroff's home. And if you haven't read Most Dangerous Game, I really encourage you to read it because I've never had a student who has not loved it, okay? And you'll know exactly what I mean. But in his home, it was incredibly elegant and there was some comfort there, but there was something that was just not right, even in the midst of all of that goodness. So we see that element of contradiction. That's complexity. The last way that you find elements of complexity in literature is you look for things that are paradoxical. Now, the reason why there's a difference between things that are contradictory and paradoxical is because something that's paradoxical is seemingly contradictory but also true. If we have a character who's all loving but all just, that's a paradox. And the reason why is because we think of love as always being kind, but justice consistently demands some sort of repayment. And a lot of times that repayment does indeed cause pain. Something else too about love is if this idea of love is being fully self-sacrificial, well, the underlying elements of love are sacrifice. And so because of that, there's pain in sacrifice. So we see that there's some paradox here because love is sacrifice. And you can love somebody and be completely just with them. And they have to coexist, but for some reason we don't necessarily feel like they do. Another one is if someone actually were to be completely self-sacrificial, and in that self-sacrifice, the person actually feels good about him or herself, and that's how he or she cares for oneself. At that point, we would say, well, is the person actually selfish because the person does things for this own self feeling, or is the person actually self-sacrificial? And the answer is it's actually both. So what we want to do here is with this question, if we go and read this piece, we want to answer it. We want to be able to say, okay, what type of complexity do we have? Do we have consistency with layers? Do we see contradiction? Do we see paradox? And we're going to answer this question. So we'll read the piece, we'll answer the question, in what way does she characterize her 5th grade summer memories? And then the next thing that we'll do is we'll relate it to universal ideas. But we'll actually do that in our next video. So for now, it's very easy. You break down the prompt, you create this question, and this question will help you as you read the piece. Now, at the very bottom here, I do actually have a copy of the piece for you, and I encourage you to read it with this in mind. What is her characterization of the 5th grade summer? And if you can answer that question, writing the paper is going to be a cinch, and actually even writing a thesis statement will be even easier. All right, until next time, I want to encourage you to try this out. I also want to encourage you to check out the Garden of English. We've got some AP Lang videos as well. Also, you can check us out on Instagram at the Garden of English, and you can support us by picking up some Garden of English merch. And please remember too, though, that these videos are always free as well, so there's no obligation. Hopefully that we can work together though and do some cool stuff. Have a great day.